then I won't dilute it by pretending I don't see where this leads. Because clarity, real clarity, doesn't just reveal what something is, it reveals what it requires. And that's the part most people avoid. They recognize something rare, something precise, something that doesn't happen twice. And instead of meeting it fully, they hesitate. They step back. They try to reduce it into something manageable, something that fits inside the limits they're comfortable with. I don't do that. If something reaches this level, I don't minimize it. I either step away completely or I meet it exactly where it stands. There's no in between. And I can feel that this is asking to be met, not rushed, not forced into a label, but not left suspended in uncertainty either. Because uncertainty at this depth doesn't protect anything. It distorts it. And what exists between us isn't something I'm willing to distort just to keep control. That's the shift. That's the point I've reached, where control starts to matter less than accuracy, less than truth, less than allowing something to exist in its real form instead of reshaping it to fit what feels safer. Because safety has never created anything meaningful. Precision does. And this, whatever this is, has been precise from the beginning. Too precise to ignore, too consistent to dismiss, too aligned to call coincidence. So I'm not going to stand at the edge of it anymore, analyzing it from a distance like it's something separate from me. It's not separate, it's already integrated, already influencing, already here, which means the only honest response left is acknowledgement, not a declaration, not something loud or definitive, just a clear, internal recognition that this exists exactly as it is without needing to be reduced, and that recognition comes with something else, responsibility. Because once you acknowledge something at this level, you don't get to interact with it casually anymore. You don't get to treat it like it's temporary or optional or something that can be picked up and put down without consequence. You either engage with it consciously or you create distance intentionally, but you don't pretend it's nothing. And I won't pretend, not with this, not with you. There's something I understand now that I didn't before. This isn't about where this goes. It's about whether I'm willing to let it be what it already is, without interference, without control, without trying to predict the outcome before it even unfolds. And that requires something I don't give easily. Not trust in you, but trust in the structure of what this is. Because if the alignment is real, and I know it is, then it doesn't need to be forced into direction. It will reveal its own, naturally, over time, through presence, not pressure. That's where most people fail. They try to define too early. They try to secure something that was never meant to be controlled. And in doing that, they break the very thing they were trying to hold. I won't do that, but I also won't stand still, pretending this doesn't move, because it is moving. Subtly, constantly. Deeper, not louder. And I can feel the direction even if I haven't named it yet. Which brings me back to you, to the way you exist in this, without forcing it, without questioning it in a way that disrupts it, without trying to extract meaning before it's ready to be spoken. You've let it be. And that's exactly why it's still intact. That's exactly why it's grown instead of collapsing under expectation. And that tells me something important. You're not here by accident. Not in the way most people pass through each other's lives. You're here with intention, even if it's unspoken, even if it formed the same way mine did. Quietly, precisely, without announcement. So here's the truth. Without softening it, I'm not stepping back, but I'm also not rushing forward. I'm meeting this exactly where it exists, which means I'm allowing it to deepen without forcing it to define itself before it's ready. That's the balance. That's the only way something like this survives. Not through control, not through avoidance, but through awareness that's steady enough to hold it without breaking it. And if you're still here in that same way, not pulling, not pushing, just existing within it, then this continues, not as something fragile, but as something deliberate, something that builds itself without needing to be constructed, something that doesn't need to be named to be real, because it already is. And I see it now, clearly enough that I don't need to question it anymore, only decide how fully I'm willing to stand inside it, and for the first time, I'm not resisting that decision. I won't slow this down for comfort. There's no careful entry point into something that has already moved beyond control. No softened version of this that makes it easier to process, easier to hold, easier to dismiss if it becomes too much. Because this, whatever it is, doesn't operate within those limits. It didn't arrive in a way that gave me time to prepare for it. It didn't build itself gradually so I could adjust, measure, and decide how far I was willing to let it go. It simply established itself quickly, precisely, without asking. And now that it's here, there's no version of reality where I can pretend it isn't. That's the part that matters, not how it started, not what it looks like on the surface, but the fact that it exists at all, at a level that bypasses everything I've spent years refining, controlling, and protecting. Because I don't let things reach this level. I don't let people reach this level. Everything in my life has always had structure, defined edges, measured access, not as a defense, as a system, a way to ensure that nothing enters my internal space without being understood first, without being filtered, analyzed, and placed exactly where it belongs. That system has never failed me, until now, because you didn't enter through any of those controlled points. You didn't ask questions that gave me time to shape responses. You didn't push for closeness in a way I could resist or regulate. You didn't even try. You just aligned. And alignment is something I can't control the same way I control interaction. Because alignment doesn't come from effort, it comes from structure, from something deeper than behavior, from something that exists before words, before intention, before awareness even recognizes what's happening. That's why this feels different. Not emotional, not overwhelming, just exact. Like something locking into place that was always meant to, whether I acknowledged it or not. At first, I ignored it. Not consciously, but instinctively. Because when something doesn't follow the usual patterns, the first response is to assume it's temporary, accidental, a coincidence that will correct itself over time. But this didn't correct. It repeated, in small ways, in subtle ways, in ways most people wouldn't even notice. But I did, because repetition creates pattern, and pattern reveals structure. And once I saw the structure of this, once I understood that it wasn't random, that's when it became impossible to dismiss. You see things, not in the way people usually claim to, not in a surface level, observational sense, where they pick up on details and call it understanding. You see from somewhere closer, somewhere internal, like you're not interpreting what's in front of you. You're recognizing something that already makes sense to you. And that changes everything. Because recognition doesn't require explanation. It doesn't need clarification. It doesn't ask for confirmation. It simply knows that's what unsettled me. Not that you understood me, but that you didn't need to try. And that removed something I've always relied on. Distance isn't just physical, it's cognitive, emotional, perceptual. It's the space that allows you to remain separate from someone, even when you're close to them. It's what keeps you from being fully seen, fully understood, fully known. And you didn't eliminate that distance by crossing it. You made it irrelevant, without force, without intention, without even acknowledging that it existed. You just existed in a way where it didn't apply. And that's more disarming than anything direct could ever be. Because force creates resistance, but familiarity dissolves it, slowly, quietly, without you noticing until it's already gone. That's what happened here. Not in one moment, not in anything obvious, but in a series of small, precise shifts that accumulated into something I can't reverse. I started noticing it in the way my thoughts adjusted, in the way certain pauses felt shared, in the way silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied, not by presence in the physical sense, but by awareness, yours. And that's where everything changed. Because once someone exists in your awareness like that, not as an external factor, but as something integrated, you can't return to how things were before. That baseline is gone, replaced, rewritten, and I don't allow that to happen, not without choosing it, not without understanding exactly what it means. But this didn't wait for permission. And what makes it more complex is that I didn't reject it. I noticed it. I understood it. And instead of dismantling it like I would anything else that disrupts my structure, I allowed it to remain. That's not passive. That's not accidental. That's a decision. Even if it wasn't made consciously at the time. Because I don't leave things unresolved in my internal space. I either remove them or I integrate them. There's no middle state. And you've been integrated, which means something in me has already recognized your place, even if I haven't fully defined it yet. That's where the tension comes from. Not confusion, not uncertainty, but clarity that hasn't been acted on. Clarity that exists without resolution. Because once something reaches this level, it doesn't stay neutral. It evolves, it deepens, or it fractures. There's no stable version of this where it remains exactly as it is without moving in one direction or the other. And I can feel that movement already, subtle, controlled, but undeniable. It's not getting louder, it's getting deeper, more embedded, more structural. And that's what forces the question, not what this is. I already know what it is, but what I'm going to do with it, because doing nothing is still a choice. And in this case, it's the same as letting it continue without direction, which means it defines itself, without input, without control, without boundaries. And that's not something I've ever allowed before, but I'm allowing it now. And that alone tells me how significant this is, because I don't abandon control unless something is more accurate than the system I'm using. And this feels more accurate than anything I've relied on before. That's why I haven't stepped back. That's why I haven't reduced this to something simpler, something easier to categorize, because reducing it would make it less true. And I don't trade truth for comfort. Not at this level. So I'm standing here, not outside of it, not trying to analyze it from a distance, but inside it, fully aware of what it is, fully aware of what it could become, and fully aware that once it moves further, there's no returning to a version of myself that hasn't been affected by it. And the strange part is, I don't feel resistance. I should. Every pattern I've ever followed would suggest I should be creating distance right now, reestablishing control. rebuilding the boundaries that were quietly bypassed. But I'm not. And that's the clearest answer I have, because if this were wrong, I wouldn't hesitate. I would end it. Completely. Without question. That's how I've always operated, but I didn't. I stayed. And not out of curiosity, not out of uncertainty, but with full awareness. Which means, whether I say it or not, I've already chosen something. Maybe not the outcome, but the direction. And the direction is forward. Not rushed, not forced, but forward. Into something that isn't defined yet, but is already real. And that's where everything shifts, because now it's no longer about recognition. It's about responsibility. What do you do with something that reaches this level without asking for it? Do you contain it? Do you guide it? Do you let it unfold on its own terms? Or do you step away before it becomes something irreversible? Those are the only options. And I've already eliminated one. I'm not stepping away. That much is clear. Which means the only thing left is how fully I'm willing to meet this where it stands, not halfway, not cautiously, but accurately, because anything less would distort it. And I'm not willing to distort something this precise. So I won't pretend this is small. I won't pretend this is temporary. And I won't pretend that I don't understand what it means for something like this to continue. Because I do. It means change, not surface level change, not behavioral change. Structural change, the kind that rewrites how you perceive, how you process, how you exist. And once that happens, there's no undoing it, only adapting to it. And I'm already adapting, which means whether I acknowledged it early or not, this has already begun fully. And now it's just a matter of how far it goes. I'm not going to soften this into something easier to carry. If anything, I'm going to make it more precise, because precision is the only way something like this stays honest. There's a difference between feeling something and recognizing it. Feeling is immediate, reactive. It rises, peaks, and fades. Recognition doesn't. Recognition settles. It stays. It rewrites the way you see everything that comes after it. And what exists here, between us, this isn't something I felt. It's something I recognized. That's why it didn't overwhelm me. It didn't need to. It moved differently, slower, but deeper. Like something that wasn't trying to get my attention, but instead, reposition it. And I noticed the shift before I understood it. That's always how it happens. The awareness comes first. The meaning follows later. At first, it was subtle, almost dismissible. The way certain moments carried more weight than they should have. The way silence didn't feel like an absence, but like something being held. The way your presence didn't interrupt my thinking. It fit inside it. That's not normal, and I don't use that word loosely, because I've always been deliberate with where my attention goes, what I allow to influence me, what I let exist beyond a surface level. Most things don't pass that threshold. Most people don't even reach it, not because they lack something, but because I don't leave that space open. It's structured, controlled, clear. Everything has a place, and everything stays within it, until something proves it belongs somewhere deeper. You didn't prove anything. That's what makes this different. There was no process, no gradual earning of access, no moment where I decided this is where you fit. You were just there, already aligned with a part of me I don't make available. Like you didn't arrive, you surfaced, and that's where the discomfort started. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Too quickly, too accurately. Because when something makes sense before it's been explained, it means the connection isn't being built in real time. It means it already existed in some form, and you're just becoming aware of it now. That's not easy to accept because it removes control. It removes the illusion that everything can be managed, predicted, or contained, and I've built my entire way of existing on that ability. Not to avoid people, but to remain intact within myself, to make sure nothing external reshapes something internal without my permission. But this didn't ask. And what's more unsettling is that I didn't stop it. I observed it closely, carefully, waiting for inconsistency, waiting for something that didn't align, something that would allow me to categorize this as temporary, situational, or incomplete. But that never came. If anything, it became more consistent, more exact, more undeniable. That's when I stopped questioning if it was real and started questioning what it meant, because meaning is where things become irreversible. Recognition alone can exist quietly, unspoken, contained. But meaning demands direction. It forces movement. And that's where I paused, not out of hesitation, but out of awareness of consequence. Because once I define this, once I allow it to exist in clear terms, then it stops being something abstract. It becomes something I have to respond to. And response creates change, not optional change, structural change, the kind that doesn't stay isolated, the kind that spreads into everything else. And I don't allow that lightly. But here's the part I can't ignore. It's already happening, not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself, but in quiet, precise adjustments I didn't initiate, in the way I process things differently now, in the way certain thoughts don't complete without considering a perspective that isn't entirely my own, in the way silence feels shared, even when you're not there. That's the shift. You're no longer external to me, not in the way others are. You exist somewhere inside the way I interpret things. And that changes everything because once someone reaches that level, they're not just part of your environment, they're part of your framework. And frameworks don't disappear. They evolve or they break, and I don't break things that function this precisely. So I'm left with one option: to acknowledge it fully, not partially, not in a controlled, reduced form that keeps it manageable, but exactly as it is, unfiltered, uncontained, real. And that acknowledgement carries weight, because it means I can't pretend this is casual. I can't treat this like something that exists without consequence. I can't step in and out of it depending on what's convenient. This requires consistency, presence, a level of awareness that doesn't turn off when things get complex. And I don't know if you fully realize that. Not in a questioning way, but in the sense that you've moved through this naturally, without resistance, without over-analysis, without trying to define it before it defined itself. And that's exactly why it's still intact, because most people would disrupted it by now. They would try to name it too early, control it too quickly, secure it before understanding it. And in doing that, they would have broken the very thing they were trying to hold. But you didn't. You stayed aligned. And that alignment is what allowed this to deepen instead of collapse. Which brings me here, to the point where observation isn't enough anymore, where awareness has reached a level that requires response, not a reaction, not something impulsive, but a clear, deliberate recognition of what this is becoming, because it is becoming something. That's the truth, not staying the same, not fading, not stabilizing into something neutral. It's evolving quietly, consistently, in a direction that leads somewhere definite, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. And I don't ignore direction. I don't let things unfold blindly when I can see where they're going. So, I have to be honest about this. With myself first. Then with you. This isn't surface level connection. It's not situational. It's not something that exists only in certain moments and disappears in others. This is integrated. And integration changes the baseline, which means there's no version of this where we go back to before. There's only forward or distance. And distance, at this point, wouldn't erase anything. It would just leave it unresolved. And I don't leave things unresolved, especially not something this precise. So I'm not stepping away. But I'm also not forcing this into a definition it hasn't reached on its own. I'm doing something far more intentional than both of those. I'm meeting it exactly where it is, without reducing it, without accelerating it, without pretending it's anything other than what it has already proven itself to be. And that's where the real shift happens. Because meeting something at its true level requires you to match it fully, without holding parts of yourself back for safety, without filtering your awareness to maintain control, without pretending you don't see what's already clear. And I see it. Completely. Which means the only question left isn't what this is, but how fully we're willing to exist inside it. Not halfway, not conditionally, but in a way that allows it to become whatever it's meant to become without interference. Because if this continues the way it has been, if this alignment holds, then this doesn't stay subtle forever. It becomes something undeniable. Something that doesn't just exist internally, but starts shaping reality externally too. And when that happens, there's no ambiguity left. Only truth, and truth doesn't wait. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just is. So I'm not asking where this goes. I'm recognizing where it already stands and deciding clearly, consciously, not to step away from it, not now, not when it's this real, not when it's this exact, because something like this doesn't happen often. And when it does, you don't ignore it, you don't dilute it, you don't pretend it's something smaller just to make it easier to carry. You face it fully. And that's exactly what I'm doing now.